Welcome to this episode of the People Dividend. I'm your host, Mike Horne, and I am delighted to have in our virtual studio today Marcus Neukom. And Marcus is a person of many interests in leadership and personal development, in executive coaching. And I think we'll learn a lot from Marcus in the time that we have together today on the People Dividend. But let me tell you a little bit about Marcus as well. And our topic's really going to focus today on imposter syndrome, leading with confidence, things that I know are so important to everyone in our audience. What Marcus does is he helps CEOs, founders, and high achievers turn self-doubt into millions. If you're asking, he says rhetorically, is this as good as it gets or is this more? He helps unlock to the next level, trusted advisor to founders, boards, and venture capitalists. I'm so glad, Marcus, and you can find more about Marcus at Marcus, MarkusNeukom.com. And we'll have all of that, all the links to Marcus's websites and LinkedIn and all of that kind of stuff in the show notes. Marcus, tell our audience about yourself. I think you can do better than I can.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. It's a huge pleasure. So my name is Markus Neukom, and I'm originally from Switzerland. I started my career in HR. I was a human resources director, and surprisingly, I quickly realized it's not the right place for me to be, because I had a conversation with a head of operations who was a former American Express guy, a very tough one. And he said, Marcus, the only place where you really have impact is if you actually switch side and leave HR and come over to operations and become a manager. To be honest, I did not dare yet. So it took quite some years to actually leave HR. And when I left HR, I realized I have so much more to give, as the guy Rito, that was his name, actually said then. And I started focusing on helping managers who got displaced in an outplacement process. And I realized there was this one question which bothered so many of my clients. Is this it? Or is there more to my life? And as you can imagine, Mike, when I was working with those clients, sometimes up to 10 a day, rehashing this question all over and over and over, it suddenly turned from a very tiny voice into a huge bullhorn in my head and my soul. And I suddenly asked the question myself, is this it? Or is there more to my life? Which then led to a sabbatical, which then led to leave corporate. And I became an entrepreneur. At first, I helped corporate, but what was interesting, something kind of puzzled me, Mike. And it was kind of a lack of taking responsibility. And then I had a conversation with many of my friends, and they said, Marcus, you have to understand, the higher up you go in the echelon, in the hierarchy, the better the salaries, the better the bonuses, and the less pressure to change. And that, to be honest, surprised me. And I am absolutely aware of that this is not to be generalized, but this is something which I really have experienced for some time. And that's when I decided, okay, I am focusing more on the side which actually has a huge stake in the game. And, that's why I specialized on tech entrepreneurs, because quite often they have their money, literally, and they are running a risk of losing it. And they have all interest in bettering themselves, in breaking through some blockages, which probably, even if I look back at my corporate career, would not have seen a necessity so much. unless, and that's the caveat, unless my employer had paid for it. So this is pretty much how I landed where I am today. And I couldn't be happier, because helping, a target class or a target group that is in dire need of change, and being able to help them to achieve that and accomplish their goals is the greatest thing so far in my life.
And how do you discover these people who have the kind of qualities and interests that your set of skills to whom that would be helpful? How do you discover these folks? How do they come
That
to
is
you?
a
How do they?
very interesting question, Mike. When I changed I was teaching for more than 20 years, and I suddenly got the call from a corporation, actually from the US, to become a senior vice president and run a management team in a co-leadership. And I had exactly 5 people left in my business Rolodex. So what's interesting, when I came to the US 4 months ago, I had 5 people in my Rolodex as well. So I remembered I coined the term working the net instead of networking. Networking basically means amassing contacts. You have a huge Rolodex. But I focused on those 5 people, reached out to them, and I said, look, I just landed. I would love to get to know interesting people. And when they asked me what kind of people, I said, people you believe would vibe with me, people I would vibe with, and people you trust. So guess what? Within 8 weeks, I have more than 100+ conversations. So it literally comes by building trust and trusting that those people who I built the trust introduce me to the right people. So it basically took one person who understood turning self-doubt into confidence literally frees the potential of $1 million. Because, I asked that person for the first time, actually, how much do you believe you have left at the table due to imposter syndrome, due to self-doubt? And that person paused and said, millions. I will be a billionaire today.
Now, I believe that what you've been expressing is how you perhaps, and I don't want to infer this, but perhaps how you overcame your own self-doubt, or were you sort of a natural at this working the net?
No. You see what's interesting? Imagine if you've been teaching for almost 20 years, and then you get the calling, and then you get appointed, and you are at the networking session where you were the guest. You're the host. Sorry, the host, not the guest. And it couldn't have been easier to network with those people who came. And my partner found me in a far corner on my own. And she asked me, Marcus, what's going on? You're the host. And I said, honestly, I can't do it. And that's when I reached out to a friend of mine and I said, look, I need help. And he asked me, how many people do we have in the Rolodex? And I said, 5. He said bluntly, Marcus, you're screwed. So then he said, send me one of those clients. Because imagine that, Mike, I would have needed to provide connections for 100 potential clients in the coming year. And I had 5 people in my Rolodex. So he said, send me one of them. Let me have a chat. Chris is his name. He called me and he said, Marcus, what a fantastic person. So I was wondering, what will my client come back with? And he said, Marcus, it was great meeting Chris. And by the way, and that was the key, Mike, he already made introductions to 3 people of his network. And that's when I knew I have struck gold. That's when the term and got coined, working the net instead of networking.
I see. Wonderful. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with our audience. And now I'm wondering, as an executive coach, you're having, multiplied from this 5, or perhaps stayed consistent with the 5, or perhaps managed ebbs and flows of 5 or more. What are some of the situations in which your clients experience this imposter syndrome?
It's interesting. I was at a session last night where we were all aspiring or current board members, where you could think like, how could they experience self-doubt, right? They are made. And each and every person said, look, we do know so well what this means to establish imposter syndrome, especially to experience self-doubt. And there was one person who said, why do you pay so much attention to the self-doubt and imposter syndrome? Isn't that just normal? Shouldn't we just accept our limitations? And I said, look, if you're an entrepreneur, for example, and you have this amazing idea and you want to go to market, for example, if you suffer from imposter syndrome, you can imagine what happens. The campaign might flop. You will entertain the wrong channels. You will, work with the wrong people. Your messaging will be subpar. So we literally go throughout the entire business cycle, I would say. It starts with hiring, and it starts with hiring and it ends with retention, for example, just in HR. And to be honest, I don't know any area where imposter syndrome and self-doubt actually does not have a fatal effect in the end.
Let's take it to the next expression of this, which is on leading with confidence. So here you are, you've got 5 leads, and what makes you confident to do something with those 5 leads?
I would say it literally comes from, I don't do anything I have not experienced myself. Yeah, I've been in business for more than 20 years, and I'm proud to say that I don't teach and I don't coach anything I have not experienced myself.
So explain,
That's why I am
say some more about that. Yeah, yeah.
You see,
We're talking about that niching,
yeah. Yeah, this is interesting, and this is quite personal. During COVID, I was hit with a depression. Managers would call it burnout. It was actually a blessing in disguise. Manager would call it a burnout, but in the end, it's a depression. And I was close to giving up my business because I wondered, how can I teach others? How can I coach others if I am not at the top of my game? And that actually brought me to ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT, please provide me with a list of 10 topics I could start writing about on LinkedIn, if any. And honestly, I was hoping to receive an answer, Marcus, you should take a sabbatical or something like that. But ChatGPT came back with 10 topics, and number 7 was imposter syndrome. So I started writing about imposter syndrome, and I received great feedback. I received critical feedback. And one of them was, Marcus, I can totally relate to the symptoms of imposter syndrome, but not to imposter syndrome itself. And that made me think. So I went back into my cubicle and gave it some thoughts. And I suddenly realized, the actual problem is the term imposter syndrome. Calling it imposter syndrome is detrimental. Because, if you look at the syndrome, if doctors do not know anymore what to say, they create a syndrome. So if I diagnose you, Mike Horne, with imposter syndrome, pardon my French, but you're screwed. Because you don't really know what's going on. You are suddenly confronted with the syndrome. You feel yourself an imposter. And all I can say is good luck for you, really.
Yeah, I've never had that. I've never had that feedback. I mean, when people are asked to describe me, they usually use 3 words. They use the word calm. They use the word confident. When I, think about that in relationship to confidence, and competent. I mean, those are the 3 ways in which people typically describe me, and that's what I bring to executive coaching. And I realize there are clients with whom I work who experience imposter syndrome. And the folks that I work with, I suspect you as well, tend to be very competent. PhDs, MDs, MD PhDs, who are often asked, because of their technical expertise, to move into other managerial situations.
Mm-hmm.
And at times, this issue of imposter syndrome may arise. And I work as an executive coach, perhaps, to understand, explore, and problem solve, and I'd say make progress on those issues. Do you find something in a similar vein, Marcus Neukom, or?
It's interesting. Part of my research was looking at the dictionary, what it says about imposter syndrome. And it's highly enlightening. In spite of knowing that you have what it takes, you still doubt yourself. So it is actually very prevalent. The higher up you get in the hierarchy, the more prevalent actually becomes. So what it basically means, you said the one was competence and the other was confidence, right?
And the third was calm, CALM, calm.
Yes.
Calm.
So if I look from the right side, let's start with the three. The competence leads to confidence, and confidence leads to calm.
Yeah. I call it being comfortable in your own skin, and understanding who you are and working on who you are, so that you can bring more of who you are to what you do, and then use your agency in order to help clients move to the next step, whether that's
Absolutely.
in the one-on-one work I do as an executive coach, or whether that's consulting to an executive team, or working on an organization development project, such as helping to restructure an R&D team, a research and development team, or helping a group of people perform better. So I find these three things, it's a nice way that you begin to describe them for me as we move from right to left.
So maybe I misunderstood you or did not really hear you correctly. What do you want me to do next?
Oh, I think, in terms of next is just to continue to, talk about your practice and how you evolve it and work through these issues.
Okay. Okay. Now I understand. No, because I thought you wanted me to elaborate more on those three terms you mentioned. That's why I asked.
No.
Okay. So you see what's interesting, and then I mentioned niche down. In the beginning, I focused on tech entrepreneurs, their boards, and VCs, specifically in the hiring process, the retention process, because I believe that's where most mistakes are made. And the second part was working with A players. Because, if you look at an opera, for example, you have the choir, and they're all great singers. Then you have the soloists, and the soloists have to be treated differently. Like I was one of them. So if I had been treated like the choir, I don't think I would have very much appreciated it. That's where the term diva is coming from. So those A players, I believe, have a little bit tendency to be divas and wanting to be treated differently. So what then realized is, okay, there are hundreds of coaches out there who claim to be amazing in hiring and retention and in team development. But then I realized I am actually fit for probably only a couple of handful people who realize, I have achieved so much. And there is this glass ceiling which I want to break through. And the question which I mentioned before, is this as good as it gets? Or is there more to my life or to my business? Is so prevalent that they say, you know what? It does not matter how much it costs because I see the potential. So if I can break through that, I am willing to pay the price. And as we know, Mike, the price is not just simply money. It's a lot more than that. So that's when I decided to really, really niche down to people who say, self-doubt literally holds me away from millions.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, it's been a great conversation with Marcus Neukom on imposter syndrome and leading with confidence. And Marcus, as you think about making progress in this area, about leading
Mhm.
confidently, recovering from imposter syndrome, or making a change in that, what one or two pieces of advice would you give to our audience as we wrap up?
The most important one is authenticity,
Hmm. Topic
because
of
I be
my first book, working and living authentically,
yeah,
integrity by design. My first book. Mhm.
yeah, pretty much, because I believe as soon as someone acknowledges, I don't have to be able to know everything, especially tech entrepreneurs and tech managers. Speaking human or leading is not a God-given talent. It's an art form. It has to be learned. So if someone has the humbleness to understand, yes, there are some areas I'm not really skilled, and it's okay because I can learn it.
Mhm.
In Switzerland, we have this saying that most startups who fail would not fail if somebody had the humility and the authenticity to realize that the initial business plan does not work and
Mhm.
pivot. And I believe it's pretty similar in a career.
Wow, that's wonderful. Um, that's really great. I think about my own experiences. Having worked a bit in Switzerland and certainly in the U.S., is Americans always bring all of this optimism and get it done kind of thing. And, to compare that with Swiss engineering and the plan in order to execute perfectly, it's quite a cultural difference. And certainly
I
pluses
agree.
and minuses about how you integrate the
Mhm.
best of both of those.
Mhm.
Um, no, really wonderful. Well, Marcus, again, if folks want to get in touch with you, why don't you tell them how to do that? What the easiest way to do that is?
So the easiest way is definitely reach out through LinkedIn, which is just marcusnewcomb.com, or on LinkedIn, Marcus Neukom. They will find me immediately, and best is send me a direct message, and I'd love to get in touch with them.
All right, great. Well, until the next episode of the People Dividend, everyone, stay well.